How can I accuse Boris Johnson of lying before the Committee of Privileges has heard his oral evidence? I'm Mike Cashman, and in producing a book, It's My Party and I'll Lie If I Want to with Augusta Lees, then I've clearly stated my opinion. But let me aim to answer the question, and it does make sense for me to answer that question before the Committee of Privileges has heard from Boris Johnson, because I'm talking about what I know before that oral hearing. Let's keep this fairly simple. From 1st of June 2020, for a considerable period, the regulations prohibited gatherings of more than a very small number of people from different households unless they were reasonably necessary for work purposes. Now, it's not in dispute that on the 13th of November 2020 and on the 27th of November 2020, Boris Johnson attended a social gathering, a leaving party, in each case, and I believe made a speech. Now, let's apply the test as to whether these gatherings to mark somebody leaving were reasonably necessary for work purposes. The case has been made that it's appropriate when somebody leaves a place of work to mark their achievements and thank them for what they've done. Fair enough. Can it be done on Zoom? Yes, it can. Therefore, meeting in person is not reasonably necessary for work purposes. Of course, if you do it on Zoom, that doesn't allow the snogging and boozing that actually happened. Nevertheless, the purpose of thanking people for what they'd done, the reasonably necessary purpose, could be achieved on Zoom. Now, Boris Johnson has laid much emphasis on the advice that he had from officials. These regulations were intended to be straightforward to understand. You are not supposed to be required to get legal advice in order to understand whether you are within the rules or not. Nevertheless, Boris Johnson relied on, he says, on such advice. But actually, we can look at these two events and let's just suppose that there was any element of doubt in Boris Johnson's mind after the event on the 13th of November as to whether that event had been within the regulations. He had the opportunity to get advice from civil servants, and the advice would surely be that the gathering was against the rules, and to take that into account before repeating the offence on 27th of November. The idea that he could attend both events and be unaware that they were against the regulations is really laughable. Now, some people have said, well, he didn't arrange the events. That doesn't matter. He attended. He knew they were happening. It's not credible to say that he did not know that they were against the rules. And he lied to Parliament about them. He denied their very existence. He didn't even say, well, there were some gatherings and I'm seeking advice as to whether they were within the rules or not. He assured us, firstly, that no such parties had happened, and then later on that the COVID guidance was followed at all times. And on this business of arranging events, I will just mention the May 2020 event, the Bring Your Own Booze party, where Martin Reynolds, Boris Johnson's private secretary, sent an invitation to more than 100 people, proposing a gathering in the Downing Street garden, which happened and which Boris Johnson attended. I've spoken to a previous holder of this post of private secretary to the Prime Minister, David Dayas, who assures me that there is no way that the person in that role, private secretary, would arrange such an event on their own initiative. They are not an executive, they're a secretary to the Prime Minister. They would only be doing the Prime Minister's bidding. Now, that particular piece probably can't be proved if Martin Reynolds asserts that he arranged that party on his own initiative. But it is not credible to believe that Boris Johnson knew nothing of that occasion until the moment at which he went out into the garden to speak to the people concerned. And to cap it all, we heard Boris Johnson's declared shock and anger after the Allegra Stratton video came out, where he was as furious as other people to discover that there had been such parties in Downing Street when he knew all along that they'd been happening. So to characterise his attitude as, it's my party and I'll lie if I want to, I think is entirely fair. If not, Mr. Johnson, then sue me. And just as a footnote, somebody has sent in a comment, Mike, why do you keep going on about the books? Well, fair enough. If in watching the channel you have bought at least one of the things that I've put effort into here and therefore contributed something to the channel, perhaps you're entitled to say that. But if you haven't, and you've watched all the videos and never bought anything from View Delta, I don't think you have too much reason to complain. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Please feel free to add yours in comments on the video. Thank you.